Good evening, everyone. Very delighted to be here with this esteemed audience. The topic that I am covering is technology excellence at scale and speed. Right? So in today's world, Anish Bhai and Kiran had spoken in the afternoon session about rapid prototyping. Right? So today, businesses want to launch new offering and solution rapidly, and I think somebody was telling 6 weeks, 8 weeks is the maximum. And not just that, when you launch it for success and you become successful, you want to scale also it very rapidly. Right? At the same time, while doing that, you don't want to lose the excellence. Right? I think in past or even today, we would have seen that a service comes with very high quality, excellence, great experience. And as soon as they scale, you start seeing deterioration in the service experience and quality. Right? So it's a challenge that how would you launch at scale, speed, at the same time maintain the excellence and in fact enhance it. Right? So this is what I wanted to talk about. I am a Chief Technology and Product Officer at Reliance Retail, heading fashion and lifestyle business. And I'm sharing sort of some of the learnings that I have got over more than 2 decades working with various startup and big organization. So while there are many elements, I think there are 4 key pillars when we come to that excellence. It's of course platform, and in the AJIO session we talked about how we are seeing platform as a product, having that mindset of thinking of platform as a product. Process and practices, organization structure, and the culture. From the platform pillar side, these I see as some of the key elements. We talk about high availability, scalability, but I think the elements that we do not pay enough attention to are the maintainability, observability, and debuggability. So as I mentioned, when you have to quickly launch something over a period of 6 weeks or 8 weeks, you quickly build a prototype or what you call as MVP and go ahead with the market. And of course, you have not built it for full scale and glory, right? And then you become successful and you now quickly have to scale. And almost every organization goes through this trajectory. Even if you are designing a system from scratch where they have to migrate from what has become an old architecture to a new architecture, right? And what are the challenges with the legacy versus the modern? So I take an example from what we had done at AJIO as well as in my previous organization at Lenskart. So we were on a monolith e-commerce. In one company it was Magento, in another company it was Hybris, Sterling. You quickly launch your site or AM site, but it's very rigid. Quickly configure pages, you are live and all that. Then we wanted to add app in Lenskart, right? And then you are stuck. Then you sort of do force fitting. Then we wanted to go omni-channel, started opening stores. We had to launch POS, and you again sort of you have a spaghetti architecture and code, and you further complicate it, right? Versus the headless commerce, which is you separate your front ends completely from the back end, and same back end is serving all your, and it is very easy to then add. And this is sort of the journey which we went through in Lenskart 2016 to 2019, where we were rapidly launching stores. We launched app, we launched iPads in our stores. So some of the fundamentals of modern architecture, especially on the e-commerce or commerce side, is headless architecture. And then irrespective of domain, I think it applies almost 99% of the cases that go API first, microservices, cloud native. So this is sort of what we, this is generic one, very in the shades may vary, but something similar we did in AJIO, Lenskart, or even other organization I have been. So basically, it is like in case of Lenskart, we had to, when we started adding a store, it was easy to add point of sales as one of the front end channel. Then we say we want to delight customer with a very differentiated personalized experience. That's when we launched iPads to our store executive. And it was simple to add that front end without changing much on the back end. Right? Cloud native, a lot of services we can use from Amazon, not much effort required. But at the same time, also wanted to highlight, you use Go Cloud Native, you can use managed service, unmanaged service, but in some cases, you may also use them as infrastructure as service. So for example, API gateway, for reasons, we did not went with the Amazon API gateway, but we use this open source, which is Zool by Netflix. Right? And then this is the microservices architecture compared to the old system which we had. The beauty is that every services can scale independently. Right? You have application load balancer for each service. So if your card service is facing a lot of load, just card service scales. Right? Your order service is not going to impact card service or vice versa. Right? And you can use different databases based on what. If it is a highly transactional system, you use SQL-based technology. If it is more user management sort of a thing where you need flexibility with the schema, you use NoSQL. An important point I want to highlight here, and which in the morning session also Kiran mentioned, that in this journey what is also important is make before you break. You suddenly cannot transpose yourself from a very old or an old architecture to new one. So what would you do in that case? Right? Because the risk of anything going wrong is very high. And no matter how much due diligence you do, you are going to hit that challenge. So this is for sort of example, one thing among many patterns that one can use. So if you see here, we firstly launched this new architecture, firstly in pieces and then also partial load. So let's say 5% consumer were being diverted to the new one and 95% traffic was still coming to the old one. At the same time, we were sort of publishing all the key events which causes any state change through a queue, which was also populating the old architecture, right? So even if we face problem for those 5%, there is a parallel processing complete solution being run parallelly in the old system, right? So you still do not lose transaction or the customer. We can easily switch. So this is one important thing again across 3 organizations, including AJIO, that we have used when we have moved from old or legacy architecture to the new one. And then of course, data analytics, you isolate your storefront experience, which is much more real time with post-order processing, which you can go asynchronous. And you can take these from old to new system in a phased manner. So we first went ahead with the storefront and then next year we went on the back end. Coming to processes, again, a lot of things here, but something I wanted to highlight is, of course, Agile, and I'm not going whether you use Scrum, Kanban, depending on your needs, but being iterative, launching a small value addition rather than a big bang is key. Of course, a lot of automation, and a big emphasis on shift left, whether you are talking about testing, rather than all development is done, embed, unit testing, embed testing right at the early stage of development. And same applies to security. I think there has been a lot of discussion around security, but one of the important element is it is baked right from your product specification to your development. As soon as the code is being checked in, can I figure out vulnerability and throw it to the coder, right? So shift left again is a big process change, but all of this need a mindset and culture change, because all of this would fail if we are not addressing people and culture. So some of the learnings I wanted to highlight, that whenever you are doing this transformation, it's important that you have a team which is running business as usual, because business is not going to stop in this journey. They are going to demand new and new features, right? And create a B team for building the new platform. What I learned is that when you are building this team, it's great to have a mix of people who had worked on the old system and of course people who have new tech stack understanding. What it does is that you are minimizing the mistakes, because there is a lot of learning you had done when you have matured the old platform, and you don't want to repeat the same mistakes. Uh, of course, later on we also created a third team which is sort of moonshots or looking at forward-looking things. You can try, again it depends. There are people who say go pod structure, go functional, but I would say decide what works best for your organization. Each one of them works, but you have to ensure that you have the right elements in place. I realized product architects are important to have when you are doing that sort of a journey. And wherever these were missing, I have seen journey being much more painful. And now what happens when you are taking this journey? Your talent, we talk about cloud everywhere. We are talking about elasticity in compute resources. But what about elasticity of talent needs? Because a lot of time you also have elasticity of talent need, right? I'm running 2 tracks. I may not need when we migrate to new system as much. So use staff augmentation, use other mechanism to take this journey. An important point too I wanted to highlight is that the yellow one is the trajectory with which your old system is moving, because you are continuously adding new feature. Business would not stop. This slope of your new development has to be higher than the slope of your maintenance of the old platform. And I have seen project failure happening, and my enterprises not migrating to the new architecture because of this one reason. Right? If you see the red line, you would never merge. That gap is only going to increase. And then you have to decide, because higher the slope, lesser is the amount of redundant work you have to do, but it also demands resources and other things. Right? And this is the most important element. All other things which I have mentioned would fail in absence of this element. And again, I have seen failures, success, and this has played a key role. Of course, each organization has its own culture, values, but some of the key elements that I find important in culture is, starts with the trust. If you are already a big business, this transformation is going to be likely fail or take longer trajectory if the trust within the team. It demands high element of ownership. This mindset of learn, unlearn, and relearn. I cannot emphasize it more in today's world, where technology many times becomes obsolete before it becomes mainstream. And of course, very important thing, the culture which celebrates failure. By this, of course, I don't mean you plan for failure, but you should be ready for it and celebrate it, provided you are learning from it and not repeating the same mistake. If this element is not there, again, I have seen project started getting stalled after 1 year because of fear of failure. Right? So that your team would not be able to take any leap forward. And of course, collaboration. And again, based on some of my experience, I am taking example from one of such experience, that what has been impact of such transformation. The availability we were facing was less than 97%. It went up to 99.95%. 60% reduction in time to market, new feature. And some of these matrices may be important when especially you are taking the board buy-in. The toughest thing for me had been always to take board buy-in, because you are saying that I am not going to build new capability and putting these resources just to. But these are benefits which you realize if you are able to chart this journey. We tested it for 20x of peak load, so even after 5 years, we have not reached that limit. So, and in fact, we saw a reduction of, so basically while the business grew 10 times, the team which was taking care of this storefront did not grow at all, right? Because that is the efficiency that we derived. Reduction in production issues by more than 80%, and team motivation. In fact, we saw when we launched this project, and after a quarter, when team realized that this is here to stay and this is going to see the light of day, it dropped from 20% to 8.5%. Right? So I think this is inevitable. The question is, how can we take this journey faster? And this is also would be iterative process. What you are calling as the current architecture or system today is going to be the legacy 4, 5, 8 years down the line, right? So this is a journey that has to be continuously taken, and these are some of the learnings. I think if these elements fall in place, the 4 pillars, then organizations, businesses can achieve excellence at scale. What usually I have seen is that you start a business and you probably are very excellent, your services are delighting customers. Now either organization take the scale journey slow, they get hit there, they maintain the excellence, or they scale but they lose the excellence. The toughest part is how would you traverse diagonally from low scale high excellence to high scale high excellence and not fall in the quadrant which is at the top right or bottom left. So that's it. Thank you for your attention and happy to address any question.
I think Pankaj, like you mentioned, the fear of failure should not be there, which is basically, I think psychological safety is what we are referring to. How do you pass it on to everybody in the team? It is okay if you make a mistake, but you will make better decisions because of it. How do you do that?
Yeah, sure. So I would give a context. One of my organization, this journey started because, as I said, we were really seeing a lot of challenges in launching new channels and launching new cities. The project started, and for 1 year or around 5 quarters, there was no progress. And the reason was that we as an organization were not. Certain people can fail, but not everybody. And to be honest, founders can fail, but others people cannot. That would not work, right? It did not help. So I think firstly it was important that I made it clear to the team that you fail. I mean, the question would be how much new things have you tried or how much failure you have. And even if we fail, we would discuss this is why we failed. This is my learning. This is what we would do better. And you would celebrate that honesty. Of course, as a leader, your role is that you don't let the pressure of top coming to the team below. Right? That's a buffer that you have to build in yourself. Right? You would see, and then of course, as I mentioned, important thing was being upfront, transparent with the board, telling them about business in their language. Of course, my language was not this. My language was more about financial matrices, and I used the analogy of when the companies are over leveraged, right? So debt versus equity balance, and I said debt is technical debt and equity is how much productive bandwidth you are putting. So that terminology resonated with the board, and also tell them upfront that there would be failures. Don't expect that everything would go smooth, but this is our plan to handle them. I think that reduces the pressure and people are not taken with surprise, and then you have to absorb all that and not pass it on to team. It's some of the practical learning that I've seen in these journeys.
Thank you, Pankaj, for for your presentation.